Welcome back to a new video. Today I am going to be rebinding this old copy of Isaac Asimov that has broken in half, more or less. This is a copy from 1974, I want to say. So it's seen some use. It's been well loved, well used, and it deserves to be rebound. Now, I already have a copy of the Foundation Trilogy in fancy leather, but not one that I have done myself, so I'm gonna try rebinding this in leather, my first time doing leather, and we'll see how it goes. So, let's get started. Alright, first I have to get out all my supplies, glue, and headbands, and end papers, and figure out which end papers I want, and that sort of a thing. I went with this kind of blue gradient, rainy day sort of a look, which I thought was quite nice. Most of my end papers are in blue, so we're going with that. And then pulling out a headband, I'm going to do just a simple brown to go with the leather, which I later actually change up. Anyways, just getting some dimensions here so I actually know how to cut my leather and to prepare my designs, because I'm going to use my Cricut machine that I have to kind of deboss the designs into the leather. I've never done this before for a book cover. I've tested out different small pieces, but nothing so big and fiddly. But now comes the fun part of tearing off the cover. It doesn't come off cleanly, probably because the glue is really just sort of stuck on there and worn out all at the same time, which is why it broke into pieces, but that makes it nice and easy for me to scrape off the remaining bits of cover with a knife. Small favors, I guess. Anyways. Now, before I start putting on covers and everything, I actually have to repair the signature, the text block, I mean. So what I have is some acid-free repair tape that I will be going in and taping everything together. This shows up reasonably well, although when it's done, it actually kind of disappears. It's really nice. So you can kind of repair a piece, put it together. Once it gets burnished and used and whatnot, it kind of disappears, and it's pretty effective. If I were more ambitious, I would do a regular piece of paper and glue it on with some starch glue, but I'm not that ambitious, so we're just gonna tape in all the pieces, put them together as they should be, kind of align them up, and then burnish that tape down and see where it goes. Now you'll see I didn't do a perfect job here. There's a bit on the text block that sticks up, but frankly I don't mind that much. This is an old book. This is really my second full book that I've ever done, so I'm still in the learning process. Now I'm just cutting down the end papers to size. I have a fancy paper cutter, which I used that, did that off camera, and just figuring out which way I want them to go, which I then promptly mess up, so oops. Oh well, I like it both ways, either way, it doesn't matter. And then I'm just going to glue these at the very edge and then stick them to my text block. This is just PVA glue, acid-free PVA glue. It works pretty well, and I actually need to get some more now that I think about it. Once these end papers are glued on, I'm just going to stick that into my book press for a bit to let that dry properly, and then get on with things like cutting out leather for the cover. Well, okay, no, I lied. Not leather. This is the mull that I'm using, the book cloth that you use to reinforce the spine of the book, which this book obviously needs. Apparently they don't do that with paperback as they do with hardback, but we'll get it in, we'll glue it up, put the headbands on at the same time, which should be pretty nice looking, I think. I apologize for the poor camera angle. It just doesn't really fit my book press upright in camera frame, so you'll just have to guess that I am putting on headbands and glue and putting in the reinforcement cloth. And then I'll let that sit in the book press for a good long while to dry. So I actually went to the leather store as I was letting that other stuff dry off. I had to go run some errands in town, and I found this lovely green kind of marble leather that's actually a slightly lighter weight than the brown leather that I had initially planned to use. So I thought that would be perfect for this project, and I decided to get some. I really love going to the leather store. So now I'm just cutting out some cardstock to reinforce the spine a bit more. And cover up the book cloth that you can see there, or mull, I guess it is. So just gluing that on, and it's purely a strength thing, but it also looks nice if you happen to look down the spine, which, I mean, who does that? Me, apparently. I do that. Okay. Anyways. Alright, now I've just got the chipboard there. This is the front back pieces and the spine, and I'm just measuring out the leather, how big it should be. Foreshadowing, I messed up on the engraving bit, so this will be the first time that you see this leather cut. I'm actually going to do it again in a bit, which is totally fine because, you know, the learning curve, right? No, I'll use the leather scrap from this spine for a different project, bookmark or something, so it certainly won't go to waste. When working with leather, I absolutely recommend having an absolutely super sharp pair of shears or rotary blade or whatever it is that you want to use to cut the leather. It makes a huge difference. So now I'm just placing the chipboard in, making sure it's measured correctly so that when I get the leather ready for engraving, it is in precisely the right spot. Which, spoiler, it wasn't. But that's more to do with the design that I did and not measuring that properly than to do with the chipboard not being put down properly. That was correct. The design was less correct. Oh well. It still looks good at the end. At least, I think so. So this is where I mess up the first time. I did the design backwards. I started engraving it upside down so that the front was the back, or would have been the back when I glued it on, or upside down, and it was kind of a mess. But this is the Cricut. I apologize for the sideways thing. I filmed it the proper way, but for some reason my camera said, nope, you're vertical. So anyways, it's kind of a teeny tiny CNC machine, which I have to admit is really fun. I use it for a lot of things. It looks really good, it's just not the right way around. Oops. Time to start cutting out the leather again. If anyone is wondering how much leather costs, I bought a whole side. It was $8 a square foot, and I think there were 8 square feet there, so about $64 for a side of leather, which is not too bad. So, finally got the engravings done the right way around. I was going to do stuff on the back, but given that I had already misaligned the front and the spine, I decided that I wasn't going to risk it, so I'm leaving the back plain. I think it'll look lovely just with that marbled leather anyways, so I don't think I mind too much. Just checking the text block, make sure it fits, and now I'm going to align the chipboard and glue it down. Really, I should have skived the edges of this leather, but the knife I tried to use did not want to cut the thickness down at all. So I scraped it a smidge with a different sort of tool, but it really wasn't a massive amount. Granted, the weight of this leather is not heavy enough to make that big of a difference when the text block is glued into place, but just for future, I should definitely skive down edges. Gluing the chipboard into place. It's terribly exciting, provided I don't get glue on the mat. I am known for doing that. As you can see, I got some glue on the front of the chipboard there, but it doesn't matter too much. Even so, I wipe it down, just in case. This was the point when I realized I should have started skiving things, so you'll see me break out a tool in just a minute after I glue down the first bit. Really, with leather, I should have been using a hide glue for the actual leather instead of a PVA glue. The PVA glue works great, it grabs onto the chipboard really well, but it doesn't grab onto the leather quite as well as I would have liked. Even so, with a bit of coaxing, it definitely holds. Still, for future, I should really use some sort of hide glue or fish glue. Once I finish gluing the cover to the chipboard, I'm going to put that in the book press with some wax paper to keep it from sticking, and then I'm going to move on to the foil transfer stuff. I did this with my last bookbind, the Jane Eyre bookbind, and it was a pain in the tuchus to cut out and to weed, so I bought the name brand stuff, and it worked considerably better this time. The weeding was not too bad, although I do speed it up a massive amount here because it does admittedly take forever. My only complaint with this is that the name brand stuff isn't really very shiny. I mean, it shows up reasonably well, but this is supposed to be gold. It's a matte gold, granted, but it doesn't really show up gold at all. So once again, the gold foiling is not quite what I would like, but I like it all the same. I think it looks reasonably decent. I will figure out this material thing one way or another. Apparently it's just going to take a while. Oh well, I have plenty of book projects to keep me in practice. Now I'm just putting this foil transfer right on top of where I debossed the text. I think the text looks pretty well. It would probably do better with a die in there on its own without the foil transfer, but even so, I think it looks pretty good. So now I just heat it up and it supposedly transfers right on down. Now, I had never used heat transfer foil on leather before. I think it worked reasonably well. There is some minor change to the marbling, but not a massive amount, not enough that I care or notice. So now it gets to be the fun part, which is gluing in the text block. It's kind of an adventure, because if you get it in crooked, there's not a whole lot you can do, because it's kind of put in a little blind. I tried to align it as best I could. Please ignore the noise in the background. That would be my dog desperately hoping for a walk, even though it's raining. But I aligned the text block best I could. And then you squish it together and don't move it again, because you can ruin your end papers that way. So the back went in really well. The front is just the tiniest bit crooked. Tiniest bit. Not massively. But anyways, then you stick this into the book press to dry for a while. With PVA glue it doesn't take as long. And then comes the fun part, which is pulling it out, taking off the release paper, and seeing what we've got. Look at those end papers. It is the tiniest bit crooked up there at the top, but it looks really nice. Now, I still haven't figured out how to get the end papers such that when I open the book all the way, it lays flat. They want to pull away just a little bit, so the spine never quite lays flat. It never opens flat. This is a much better attempt than my last book, the Jane Eyre book, but as you can see very shortly, it just... if I get it into frame, that'd be great. Thinking about it. So the spine, there it goes. You can see it just wants to pull away a little bit from the edge there. I don't know if that's my placement of the end papers or what. I will figure it out. But even so, it opens 99% flat. It looks really good. The placement of the text block, minus being slightly crooked, the end papers look great. You hardly notice that the leather is a little thick underneath there. I think it looks really good for an old book being rebound. And for my second project. Here I am just trying to see if I can get the spine to lay a little bit flatter. It's an old text block, so this doesn't really matter as much. If it were a new text block, it would matter absolutely to do this properly. But it sort of worked. Oh well. Even so, I really love how this came out. I love the leather. I like the foiling, the detailing there. There's a little bit of a blemish there on the side, but I think it looks really good. As you can see, the spine is just ever so slightly out of alignment, which is why I didn't do anything on the back. But even so, I absolutely love how this looks. I think it's really nice. And I'm very pleased with the final product. Well, that concludes the rebinding of the Foundation trilogy. Now, on to the next project.